Welcome to Soul Connections with your host, Elena Angel.
Hello, this is Elena Angel and Soul Connections, the space for soulful conversations and explorations in consciousness. Today you're in for a real treat, possibly one of the deepest conversations on this show. My special guest is Boaz Capsouto, a holistic mentor, bodyworker, and space holder with a wide and diverse background. Boaz and I connected for the first time a few years ago in London. I was immediately taken by his profound commitment to his soul purpose and to his path of awakening. And his path is very special. It has led Boaz to integrate Sufi practices, a non-duality mindset, a Buddhist approach, a background in business and science, gender activism, as well as neo-tantric bodywork. And so, in this recent conversation with Boaz, I took the opportunity to find out more about his unique perspective, especially with regard to relationship. Our conversation took some very interesting turns, including having a look at intimate relating and monogamy, and how these can serve as powerful ways to liberate ourselves and reach a deeper truth within. So let's go ahead and dive right into this conversation, starting with a question that made Boaz laugh. One of the things I love about you as a practitioner is that you're always working on yourself, and you're so committed to your own journey of transformation and evolution. And I'd love for you to share a little more about this. You have such a diverse background, and you're now working with people, offering coachings and body work and running retreats as well. But how did it all start? What was your main drive to search through all these different modalities and spaces?
I have to laugh because of the answer that first comes to mind. It has to, of course, it's because of my mother.
Good one.
That's like the typical, I've done, I think at this point I've gone through probably 20 years of on and off different types of modern, regular, traditional psychotherapy in different forms. It's always been with therapists who have been more connected to, let's call it alternative or non-scientific or mystical approaches as well. So it's always been an integration of those two. But at the end of the day, no matter how many openings or awakenings I might have had in different forms, what really gets in the way, or what really we can work on to get out of the way, and that takes the mommy daddy issues, the clinical approach, of course also the alternative modalities that can work on psychology, whether it's Sufi psychology or Buddhist psychology, but it's really dealing with the personality of the human. So to answer your question, I grew up to a mixed couple of, my parents are backgrounds. And my mom is, she grew up in the US in the 60s, and I was born with a relatively feminist model in my house. You could say third wave of feminism. Now we're kind of in the fourth, so that's where Tantra and Tantra massage kind of integrate into taking modern sexuality forward, and still not forgetting the aspects of gender empowerment or feminism or equality. So I think that was instilled with me from a very young age, injected, along with my own personal conditionings and traumas and cultural scripts and all of that. But the way they play together is that I've always had this inner sense, even as a kid, as just what feels right to do. Like there's this intuitive knowing that was pretty masked and rejected for the first 3 decades of my life, but it was always there. And when things started evolving, or when I started evolving to a space which was a bit more conscious, let's just say that life gave me a really big sledgehammer on my head to wake me up at some point. And we all have those in life, usually several times. But what I chose to do is to actually look inside and see, okay, this was obviously waking me up from a lot of delusions I had about life, or a lot of conditionings of how society or my culture or my parents have taught me what life is, or haven't taught me. And now it's my job to choose if I'm going to evolve or not. It's my job to choose what I'm going to do with this wake-up call, what I'm going to do with this new awareness. And that's when it got interesting. That's when feminism and being aware of gender equality and other forms of discrimination or racism, whether it was around human rights or political liberalism or refugees or whatever it was that I got involved in, there being a male in a male body in a feminist mindset, or in organizations, some of them that I volunteered in. Like my life started emerging professionally when I was actually volunteering in a rape crisis center while I was in my while I was doing my academic studies. And I started seeing that there is a uniqueness about me that doesn't really belong anywhere. So kind of being a male in a women organization was another way of experiencing that, and learning the gifts of that and the value that it brings, and the ability to help others through a process of what to me feels very natural, is just connecting the dots for people, connecting modalities, connecting approaches, connecting practices in a way that for me seemed very natural. But when I remember, I actually see that I need to sometimes explain why it seems so obvious to me, because obviously it's not always the same for others. And I think that's my biggest gift that I'm still learning to work with. How do I bring that ability to connect thoughts, ideas, concepts, practices, people, geographies, countries, cultures, to eventually make this world a better place. I mean, I've had experienced many forms of activism until I slowly started dropping the struggle of activism and just focusing on healing myself, and through that offering and modeling healing for others. But I've been deeply concerned and involved in things about refugees and the environment and gender equality and workplace equality and a bunch of other things. And somehow they started coming together in the last 10 or 15 years of my life, and became everything that I do today, which is a range of many different things that all, as you said maybe at the beginning, they are all focused on helping people be more happy, helping myself be more healed, and I guess being more awake, being more aware, more mindful, more healthy, more mature, and more connected to ourselves, to others, to truth, to source, or whatever other name we want to give it.
Thank you so much for that. And I'm sure many will resonate with this narrative of the mother influence. Yes, me too. There's also the crisis that causes one to wake up and take action. And you're right, it is unusual for a man to be assisting the feminine emergence or re-emergence that we're experiencing at this time. I often talk about it, and women often talk about it, but you don't often hear men talk about it. And actually being so supportive and so keenly connected with the essence of it, I would say. It also seems to me that even though everything that you're involved in seems diverse, ultimately it's about relationship of the person with other, with structures, with society, with race, with gender, and so on. Could you tell us a bit more about how you experience relationship? What does it mean to you? How have you explored relationship in your life, maybe?
Yeah, I'll use the framework of my Sufi teacher. Actually, I had a Sufi teacher who passed away a year ago. He was also a clinical psychologist in India, but she used a Sufi and psychological framework, but also a esoteric practice, I guess you can call it, name called the Gurdjieff sacred dances, which are highly influenced by the Sufis. And within these dances, the process is through the body to go to a place where we're unlayering, like shedding those layers from our personality, in three different ways. Basically, in relation to ourselves, in relation to the group. So it's always done in a group in order to put pressure on the personality, to wake the personality up, to break through automatic patterns, to get triggered in a safe way, in order to learn how to move through those triggers through the body rather than through other ideas that we have. So that's the esoteric mystic part of it. So there's relationship with the other, and then there's relationship with the whole, or with existence, or God, or whatever name we want to give it, the divine, or with our true essence, with our inner divine, if you want. And those all play in parallel. But when one goes to one of these dances or tries them out, what happened to me anyway, is that first I have to be faced with the journey with myself and with others, and only then there's space to be open more to our relationship with the divine. And then how it channels and moves through others, and people can connect from that soul space or that transpersonal space as well. And when that transpersonal relationship happens, which is also what I could see happens in the massage room when I give a tantra massage, or in romantic and intimate relationships that I've had, or with friends, when there's a transpersonal connection that then is now experienced by me and by another human as in this human form, and all the shadows and all the stuff that comes up, and the triggers and the desires and the cravings and the fantasies, when all that meets with the transpersonal in the background, what happens is that I started seeing how everything about relating is inherently spiritual, or is inherently an opportunity to grow, to look at myself, and to practice what I might be able to do easily in a retreat or on the meditation cushion. But in real life is a whole different story. And that's why the tool which I recommend, it had somewhat of a bad reputation in some of the business backgrounds of it. But the clinical psychological tool that my teacher and my therapist used to use, Akash was her name, is called transactional, and about intimate relating that we have with others, and how that is influenced by our script as children, and of course our core culture, and our past lives, and our relationship with the whole from the moment we were conceived. And those, at the end of the day, are a transaction. They're a transaction of energy, they're a transaction of ideas, they're a transaction of sensations, they're a full-on experience of transaction, which for most of us, because of our personalities, becomes entanglement many times. And then how to work through that, and how to enjoy it rather than suffer, and how to wake up when it causes how to play with fire without getting burnt, how to rest in the different archetypes that we can embody. So if just to sum that up, to put that in context of what you said about the masculine supporting the feminine, for many years I defined my purpose or my quality in life as that, as supporting the feminine. And I still do, because I think the feminine quality, or the feminine re-emergence, as you put it, is extremely what is needed if we want to survive on this planet as a human race. But it's also just the archetypes. It's how do I also tap deeper into my inner masculine rather than the toxic one that society and patriarchy are so good at and infuse into us, and how do I grow into my more mature and more adult masculine version of myself, and how then do I tap into my own inner feminine and mature version of feminine, and then how they express themselves outwardly, how the inner and the outer interact, how my inner journey is manifested outside through the people I relate with, and through what attracts me or repels me, and definitely through the romantic or loving or sexual relatings that we have, which for me has always been a great fascination, because when I had that wake-up call, that crisis, I realized that no one taught me this. They taught me about so many other things, but no one taught me about relating and about love and about sex. So it became quite a significant role in my own journey of waking up. And then I started seeing, because of that feminist background or awareness, how I could also, or how it benefits others also if I just keep doing it. And that's why I kind of do what I do, because there's people who benefit from it, and because it helps me also.
This is very interesting, and I'd love you to explain perhaps a little more about archetypes and the transpersonal. Could you give us an example, or how could one start to have more awareness, start to see differently a personal story from a bigger archetypal energy being played out? Is there an example you can give us, and what does it mean to find a more mature masculine or mature feminine? What is that about?
Let me say something about my journey, and maybe through that I will reach an example. Most of my journey has been to realize how strong my mind is, and how it's been misusing me, and how I don't know how to use it. And that's probably still the case, which is why one of the ways I went into a more connected, transpersonal, or energetic connection with myself and with existence, and that excludes, eventually it includes the planet and animals and trees and flowers and not just people, planets, is through balancing or rebalancing the overemphasis that the mind has been receiving. So at some point I realized, my God, I've been raised for 20 or 30 years of my life, and most of what I've been trained to is to give importance to the mind. So I need at least 20 or 30 years now to give importance to the body, or to the heart, which is eventually what took me into tantric bodywork and working with sacred dances and Sufi, the Sufi world, which is all about the heart and the wild love, the wild heart. And even Buddhism, the quivering of the heart, and the qualities of compassion and love. So somehow in my explorations, there was always some angel there, you being one of them, by the way, that reminded me that I'm on the right way, that the universe or the existence wants me to be where I am, that it's okay to continue exploring what feels right inside, regardless of what outside is being told. So I think I don't know if I'm answering your question, but the main way that I managed to do that is to just really tap deeper into what feels right inside. And that can be a very challenging task sometimes. It's like there's a compass, an inner compass, and it's all covered with mud and plants and, I don't know, dirt and clouds and you name it. And it's this process of learning to unlayer, to reach the compass and the magnetic direction that it might show us. It's interesting that I'm using the word magnetic, because in the Sufi world they use this inner pull through the magnetic center. They call it our magnetic center in the heart. Is to just listen. So all of my angels in some way or another had a lot to do with archetypes. So I was embodying it more than and practicing it more than knowing how to explain it. Like I just started reading Jung maybe a year or two ago, but I know it's been playing out inside me through the different modalities that I've been receiving. So now the answer is coming. The best way I would recommend to start is to seek, I'm not necessarily saying professional help, but to move from a space of giving to receiving, or from a space of wanting and taking to a space of receiving, to really asking for help from a genuine helplessness in a way. I'll say another sentence. There's something about addiction that I've been somehow listening to, finding out more about in the last year or two. And I'm not a very addicted personality, but there are addictions that the mind is addicted to. And we tend to be, as humans, addicted to drama and addicted to our pain, to the samsaric suffering. We tend to be addicted to our patterns from the past, even if they're unhealthy. We tend to take those patterns and unhealthy patterns that we've learned, be it from our parents or our core family or porn, whatever that context is for whoever learned about it. And we tend to take those and revisit them in our adult life because they're familiar, but there's an addiction there. And the first, or one of the first steps, from what I understand about stepping out of addiction, is to acknowledge our helplessness, to acknowledge our limitations. And when I put that in spiritual context, every time I've managed to let go and acknowledge my human limitations, because this form, my emotions, my personality, my sensations, my mind, they are in a human form, but they are also the host for my soul. If I cannot ask for help and connect more to them and have others help me in a variety of ways, connect more to that human host, to making it healthier, then the soul is not going to have much to do here if it doesn't have a healthy host. And I think that's where everything I'm doing, including new things or things that I don't do but are important, come in. Everything from taking care of our body, our nutrition, yoga, et cetera, et cetera. And being in this acceptance that we're on this human journey and we're not alone, we're interconnected, and we have dependencies and codependencies, and we live in community, and we're social creatures, and we need to support each other and work together to collectively have an energy field that helps us all, I guess, be more empowered, be more centered, be more balanced, and more in harmony with each other and with existence.
The mind is quite habitual, isn't it? And becomes conditioned and then churns out repetitive and addictive behaviors, patterns of exchange with others. And so you're suggesting we look somewhere deeper in us, maybe through our body and through our inner feeling, to reach for a deeper truth that is not habitual, that is genuine, that is more real. And I know you've mentioned a few times already your work with the body and massage and so on. Could you tell us more about such practices, embodiment practices, and perhaps what different approaches would offer, say, dancing, massage, some chanting, or some other Sufi practice that you're familiar with. How are they all different, complementary? How do you use them, and how can we use them?
Yeah, that's a good question. Also because I have some scientific background, so at some point I got super interested in, brain wave frequencies and things like that. And I also used to sing, and I drum, so voice and sound are definitely important, and you mentioned those, and it comes in chanting.
Mm-hmm.
And the language we were born into also, maybe not English, but some languages are very profound and hold a very specific frequency on their own. Yeah, so how do they integrate and how they're different? I think, first of all, they're similar. No matter what I've explored, I've found that they are all talking about the same stuff. They are eventually the same. When the intention is genuine, when there's a real deep desire to wake up or heal or connect, when the teacher or the ethics around the community we're exploring with are genuine, when there's not a lot of, let's say, spiritual bypassing or ego that is easily something we find in many forms of communities, as we do in the business world. When those are all genuine and in place, and there's really a safe structure, also in relationships, when there's a safe structure, whether it's a relationship with your therapist or with your client or receiver of a massage or your loved ones, then there is space to drop into deeper intimacy and to connect. Eventually, they're all similar in the sense that they will, the way I see it, they will connect you to your body more, help you clean what's getting in your way. They're different because different modalities and different practices help different people. Okay, because the body and the emotions can also lie. If our body is, just as an example, and then I'll go back to how they're different. If our body is in a trauma response, if we're ill-informed about trauma, whether it's developmental trauma or personal PTSD, more intense trauma events, be it war or abuse or any of those forms, then our body is not something we can trust. We still want to connect to our body, but our body is conditioned. It has a body memory. Same with the body, which is part of the nervous system, the spine, and the brain itself, that has certain ways that the neurons get clogged together, or knots of what you would say neurons. These are not the scientific terms, but there are ways that they get locked, and there's a feedback loop between the body and the brain. And this is all biology. And today there are new approaches in psychology, such as EMDR and hypnosis and other forms of clinical, traditional Western psychology that know how to actually look at that and see what happens in our biology and how we can start reprogramming that. So that's an example of the Western paradigms. The ancient ones have the same. I mean, the work, for example, with medicine plants, eventually works on many times on the brain and the mind. So they're not the same, right? There's the mind, which is our conscious thoughts or subconscious, and the biology of the brain. And many times they will help recondition that, which is why they're so good with addictions or trauma, for example, with healing those. But if the body is still in a process of memory of a trauma, then the body can pull the brain back into that space. So the way they integrate is that we have to work on all of these aspects in one way or another, either in parallel or when, depending on where we are in our journey, on the ones that are more getting in our way. So for example, if I'm a very mindy person, then probably meditation and body work and massage, receiving, even giving. For me, working in a space where I'm giving massage was a choice to choose a healthy work environment, because my sessions are usually 3 to 4 hours long, sometimes they're less, but they are a meditative space where I'm breathing, where there's no phones, no distractions, very little talk, and what is visualization. So it's very connected. So for example, a mindy person will need more body work or more dance. So the dance also does it. People who are not connected to their movement centers, to their movement, or don't do a lot of sports, maybe will value or benefit more from yoga or from dances. But to put that in context, it's not just any dance. These have to be intentional. So for example, the Gurdjieff dances that I spoke about, for those of you who are familiar with Vipassana, they're almost like a moving Vipassana. They're almost like a very intense practice of putting the body in uncomfortable situations to break biological patterns in memory. What I do in my Tantra massage is similar, by the way, also in non-tantric massages, but when the practitioner is connected to that, to their own source, kundalini, energetic, archetypes, has done enough of their work, then they're connected. It even happened in Reiki. Then there is a quality of touch and the wisdom that can be transmitted through a sequence of touch that will help the body memory resensitize itself, let traumas come up and heal and be released from the body, and let those qualities of love and connection to our heart and acceptance to our humanness unfold. Some people, which are, maybe less verbal or more connected to their body, might need another form. They might need to actually connect more to nature. Some actually need talk or hypnosis or work with visualizations. So I gave as an example before EMDR, which is a clinical approach to dealing with trauma, but it uses a lot of visualizations, which I find also in Hindu practices or in Tantra yoga. And also in some of the Taoist practices around Qi and some of the Chinese approaches. So at the end of the day, it's about balancing. And if to use again the Sufi Gurdjieff framework, there's 4 centers that we need to look at. We have our physical center, which is based on sensations, which can be giving us false signals or true signals, depending on how we've unconditioned it or how conditioned or traumatized we are. There is the emotional center, which from what my understanding in Buddhism is part of the mind, but is in the Sufi world is the heart, is a different space, is a different level of intensity of thought that is expressed through what we call emotions. And we can be extremely emotionally imbalanced or balanced or mature or immature. There's the mental center, which is the mind, which is where chanting helps, because chanting, whether it's in the Sufi world, chanting is called zikrs, but you have medicine chanting, you have it in Hebrew, you have it in Sanskrit, you have it in different modalities. Chanting helps put the brain in trance so the mind turns off. So those are the 3 main centers we have to look at as humans. And then there's the higher center, or the essence, which is what we're trying to reach. And when we choose a modality, practitioner, when we choose whether to go to a massage or go to a retreat, I think what's important is to see through self-inquiry or with the help of others, what is less balanced inside us, what is getting in our way, which center. For most of us, it will be the mind, because that's how society is structured, but not necessarily. And to see which center we need to learn to be less reactive to, and then accordingly choose the other centers to strengthen them and to integrate. I think that's pretty much comprehensive. I don't know if I totally answered your question, but I think
Yes, yes, indeed. That was amazing. Gosh, and you're adopting this multimodal approach yourself, right? When somebody comes to you, what would you do? You would speak with them, then you would feel what the best way forward for them is. How would you work with someone?
Yeah, well, when I work with someone, the real truth is to just be me. I think the main way to help people is to do your inner work on your own and put your ego aside as much as possible. So when someone comes to me, I will first communicate that, but also be very mindful of checking with them that they're getting benefits. So if somebody comes, just the other day, I had someone come and they wanted supervision around their own body work that they offer. It took one or two meetings of conversation and sessions to realize they're actually looking for psychotherapy. So to say in that point, then here is one or two people that I work with that I could recommend. But if that's what we just identified as the need, then I'm not the person. So having that approach, which is not easy professionally, I think is the most important. So that's how I work with someone. And that helps really focus when someone comes, because I kind of put myself out of the way to see what really they need. And sometimes I'll spend an hour with a person and they thought they needed a massage and eventually they don't. And actually they'll come to a retreat of Gurdjieff sacred dances, which, by the way, I only organize. I don't teach it. It's too complicated. I organize it and I bring a different teacher in to teach a woman. Most of the things I organize are actually for women teachers. Talk about supporting the feminine. I might have people in retreats that meet me and know they're ready to do some work on their sexual energy or trauma, and then they might come for a massage. Sometimes I'll work in collaboration, so I'll work with another colleague and we'll offer a more comprehensive framework that will include massages and therapy and Reiki and brain frequency work with technology and yoga, and we'll put that all together in a very customized way for the person. And usually when I work with somebody, there's an intake process. It can be 20 minutes on the phone, or it could be a few conversations and a questionnaire to see what they need the most. And the conversational part, the mental part, usually is just a support for their process of connecting more to their body, becoming more present, more aware, and more in acceptance and in love to themselves and then to anyone around them. So I think the main way I work, but many times conversation, getting to know somebody, feeling their energy is the first way. But not always. I have people who come to a massage and they're like, I want to speak about it the least as possible. They fill in the questionnaire and just, for all the technicalities, and they come and the work is actually done through the body and through the higher purpose or the higher essence that we have. I'll say it in a joke, but it's like, it's my blessing and my curse. I'm very good at talking and connecting dots. And it's also my curse, because at the end of the day, truth and love and acceptance and healing come with silence. They come from transmitting a certain energy and a certain vibration. So many times I have to put myself aside for that to move through me, or for someone else to assist me in working with that client, to really be beneficial for everyone.
Yes, that's very beautiful. And you haven't mentioned this explicitly, but through everything you've said today, I'm feeling this connectedness in the background. It's a sense of oneness, non-duality, where you, in a sense, by explaining and connecting the dots and so on, you're actually creating more transparency and removing removing layers and removing yourself even, so that what is left can be. And what is left is the essential being, right?
Yeah, I like that. The essential being. That is it. It's why I connect to Buddhism and non-duality, because they really, I know very little about it. The more I travel down this journey of life, the less I feel I know about anything. But to transparency, and one thing I like about like Buddhism and non-duality, is they define happiness through a negation, through the negative, through the cessation of suffering. So that's where the process of unlayering our conditionings, basically, and being less reactive to everything that is getting in the way of us being essential beings. So yes, there's a sense of connectedness. I'm not sure oneness is the term I would use, because we are interconnected and separate in different ways, but we're all part of a bigger picture. It's very interesting also that you use transparency, because I was always fascinated with change and coping with the unknown, which at the end of the day is our ability to cope with death. And we experience many opportunities in life of loss and grief and death of things or death of ideas to learn how to cope with that. But eventually that's our process. And I was intrigued by change and coping with the unknown when I went into business. And very quickly, the ethical parts of new types of businesses that are emerging that have to do with radical transparency and genuine authenticity and, you know, very open relating, and taking those into, like, I basically adopted those which I was first familiar with in the business world into my spiritual world or into my personal world. Where do we live with less of a gap between what's inside us or our essence and what's outside? And I think that's where it gets the most tricky in relating. So it is a deep journey of being able to stay genuine and true to ourselves. Whoever goes on my Facebook page might see, I think 2 weeks back, there was this really beautiful video of Adi Ashanti speaking about how to live in truth. What does it really mean to be truthful? Which is eventually not to lie to ourselves. And we always know when we lie to ourselves, unless we're unaware of it. But many times we allow ourselves to beautify what's actually happening, to mask, you know, to have little lies or little ways of not saying the whole truth. And when we do that, what we're basically creating is inner conflict for ourselves. So there was that voice inside me that always knew that sent me, for example, to my ever first Tantra festival when I went to do this with a partner at the time. But that was a good example that something there woke up, I didn't even know why or how, that told me, okay, I need to leave my job, my corporate job, because I'm not serving the right purpose. And it was a wonderful corporate job. It took me 2 years to leave. But the beauty about this process of listening is that it accelerates, and the more we listen, the more life rewards us and supports us. We can't do it in order to be rewarded, but life supports us. And it could be a painful process, but it could also be an extremely magical process, because in a way it's how we're open to magic or to miracles and let them into our world without struggling with them or letting the mind take over and struggle and resist it.
Yeah, magic could be seen as a higher order at work, that maybe the mind cannot comprehend or control, in a sense, the miracles. I'm just curious, do you have a sense of how humanity is evolving, especially with regard to relationships? Because I'm often asked about this, and I often wonder about this myself. We've moved through all these different conventions and societal structures like marriage and so on. This monogamy, and now there are all these unconventional ways to relate, and gender is much more fluid, and people are having polyamorous, non-conventional types of relationships. Do you have a view on those, or some perspective you'd like to share with us?
Another series of podcasts. Yeah, well, I'll keep it to the basic, because eventually I agree. There's, first of all, a very strong dogma around traditional gender roles, which is being broken through different theories and in the academy as well, and definitely in real life. I would want to say almost mostly in the West, but that's not true. I've actually experienced some very interesting things in Asia. So yes, there is an evolution in that sense. I'm not sure how much we're different than our previous generations. I think we just think we're different. I think those have waves. But the way I relate to relating is that most of us are just realizing when we stay genuine to ourselves and transparent, that eventually most of us do not subscribe inside to the idea of monogamy. And I'll say what I mean, because that can definitely spark a lot of different directions. And the way I experience it, most people practice non-monogamy or try to learn about it in a way that is escaping from themselves rather than actually dropping into deeper intimacy with their partners or with relating. So what I like about looking at monogamy or non-monogamy in context of a spiritual growth is what I said earlier about Buddhism, is defining it through the negation. Just like happiness is defined through the cessation of suffering, inherently, when we look at life or when we look at relating, inherently we're not monogamous. So we either have fantasies about other people, or we might be dissatisfied with our partner romantically, affectionately, sexually, right? They're all aspects of non-monogamy. We might have desires to explore in different ways in a transparent way with our partner. We might want to explore without our partner. We might, anyway, there are many different ways of, or we might cheat, okay? So that's the common thing that usually happens when there's frustration. Either there's breakup and a lot of battle inside us and then in the couple, or someone goes and cheats. And those are all forms, the way I see it, of non-monogamy. Now, bringing truth into that and being genuine with less of a gap between their inside and outside is to be genuine with that and to acknowledge that and to not lie to ourselves and then not to lie to our partners about it. And then see, okay, now what can we do about this? Now, that's where I think definitely we're evolving, because there's more and more people that are waking up and seeing that this just doesn't work. I mean, that whatever we were taught or told in this century or in the 20th century hasn't proven itself. And if we really want to look inside, then what I discovered is that most of us are monogamous out of fear and not out of love. So when those are two very deep aspects of spiritual awakening and of being connected to our human. Are we operating out of fear or out of love? Especially in a society that's and a structure that's designed mostly to propagate. So where does love come in? So, the Dalai Lama could say that the most is compassion, and that is the quality of love. But how does that play out in our personal life? And the way it does is by that not lying to ourselves. And how do we drop deeper into that when we're looking at sexual connection? I'm afraid of whatever fear I have, losing my partner or being unhappy or being dependent, and therefore I do not want to explore monogamy, non-monogamy at the moment, then that's very genuine. But if it says that monogamy is the way because of biology or whatever, then usually there's something there that's not self-inquiring, that's not being truly genuine with what actually is. Now, it's okay. I mean, not everyone wants to wake up. Not everyone wants to be more aware. Sometimes I think that the ones who don't are actually better off. It's quite a treacherous journey, and it's not always for everyone, definitely not for the faint at heart. But when we have that inner voice that wants to wake up, then we understand that the only thing we have is the present moment. And that's what we work on, right? In all the spiritual modalities. And labeling a relationship as monogamous is giving power to our sexual more than it should have, and it's giving power to the future, which we cannot control. Because when we say this is how the relationship will be, and if this and this will happen, then this is the result. So if you will have flirt with someone else, then I will leave you, or we will fight, or I will be hurt. We're setting us up for failure because we cannot control the future. It's the mind that wants to control the future. So being able to explore non-monogamy, first of all, on the mental level and on the genuine communication level between two partners, even if we don't do anything about it. Why I find it's important is because it forces us to be more present, more genuine, to lie to ourselves less, and more than that, to just be really force ourselves to be awake and present in the present moment, and to let go and to be okay with the unknown, which eventually will, the unknown will bite us at some point. Some people earlier in life, some people on their deathbed, but eventually we have to cope with the fact that we don't know. And so non-monogamy can be a practice of that. And when we do that with that awareness or with that intention, it can be extremely liberating, because it can help us find an inner freedom to then choose to be monogamous or not, just like we can choose to be monastic. So I'll give that example, and then I'll sum this up. But from what I understand, when a Buddhist chooses to be a monk or a nun, they choose to be monastic. It's not for life. They can choose to be it, but they can always unchoose it. And the reason is because the reason for being monastic is to say sexual desire and sexual attraction are so strong, they're too much for me to cope at the moment or in this lifetime. I want to set them aside so that I can focus on all the other dimensions of my awakening and my awareness. So approaching monogamy in that sense is wonderful, just like the monastic example. But saying, yeah, I want to, the sentence that Rumi uses, which was, I think, paraphrased on Jesus, how to be in this world, but not of this world. That's saying, how do I engage in life? How do I engage also with the shadows and the messy stuff, but still stay in inner genuine freedom and work to find my inner liberation and my partner's inner liberation and their happiness. And that goes beyond the idea of controlling each other's time or energy or who they engage with. So for me, and that only can come with after doing a certain amount of work around relating and monogamy or non-monogamy. Being, for example, open to non-monogamy is just as being open to having other forms of liberty or empowerment or freedom in our relationships. It's the same as being able to have other friends that I might prefer over my partner. It's just like having the ability to tell to my partner, look, you're amazing and I love you and I appreciate all the work that you're doing, but in this specific service that I want to offer, there is another woman that actually I want to collaborate with professionally that is more suitable, and being aware that might create jealousy or might trigger my partner on a professional standpoint with her own self-confidence, for example, or low self-esteem, but that if we do it genuinely and with love, then we all grow from that. And we find where each one of us has more connection to their inner purpose and their soul journey and their purpose in being in service. And then we can all do more of what we love the most. And they start integrating. They start also collaborating with each other. My higher purpose with your higher purpose, with my partners, with my colleagues, and if we're non-monogamous, with a lover or with other intimate relatings. But it takes a lot to put that just back in context. No one teaches us about this. It's entirely, and it takes a lot of intention and hard work and willingness to put energy into that in all of our centers, physical, emotional, spiritual, ask for help, get therapy, like the whole lot.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. You captured so much of the crux of this matter, and brought it back to what you also mentioned on your website, that your work is about having that acceptance of self and other, this being who we are truly with ourselves, reconnecting with our bodies and becoming present to what is now. And from that place, everything follows, right? So where can people find out more about you and your work?
Well, they can visit my website, awakeningandtransformation.com. It's a long website, but it's easy to remember. They can also Google my name. It's a pretty distinct name, so they could easily find my Facebook page or my contact details.
Any final message for our listeners?
What comes now is really just to do everything you can to look inside and be in your heart. Not in a way that will put pressure on you to do that, because then you're not in your heart. But to be in your heart. I'll use a sentence my Sufi teacher Akash said when she was asked once, what is this journey about for her? And she said, it's about becoming as human as possible. And she was quite awake. So that's the message I would take, is to really look at our humanness with as much acceptance and compassion at ourselves and through that to others, and to really let that be, to breathe into it, to take care of ourselves, to self-nurture, to self-care, to get others to take care and and take care of us in all the ways possible. And to know that if we do that, we will not just be happier, but we will legitimize that in our societies. And through that, we will legitimize happiness and care and compassion, and also playfulness and pleasure and joy, which is really what this life is about. I mean, there's enough suffering anyway.
Wonderful. Let's have some playfulness and joy then.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Boaz. It's been an absolute delight. Wasn't that just great? That was Boaz Capsouto. Find out more about Boaz, his mentoring, bodywork, and retreats by visiting his website, www.awakeningandtransformation.com, or go to the Facebook page with the same name, Awakening and Transformation. Don't forget to let us know how you found today's conversation, and claim your free online mentoring session with Boaz by emailing us here at soulconnections@elenaangel.com, soulconnections@elenaangel.com. Thank you so much for listening. Tune in again next week for more soulful conversations and explorations in consciousness. Bye for now. This is Elena Angel and Soul Connections.
Thanks for tuning in to tonight's broadcast. We hope you enjoyed the show and look forward to you being with us for the next edition of Soul Connections, where you can always find soulful topics and inspiring guests. To find out more about Elena, her work, and how to get in touch, just go to www.elenaangel.com. From all of us to all of you, blessings from Soul Connections.